At 1300 hours on April 22, 1943. 27. Messerschmitt Me. 3. 23. Gigant transports form up over Sicily. Each aircraft is fully loaded. Tanks, trucks, artillery, fuel drums, ammunition, troops. The convoy is flying to Tunisia carrying supplies for German forces fighting the Allied advance. Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters from Jagdgeschwader 27 provide escort. The formation proceeds across the Sicilian Straits toward North Africa. At approximately 1330 hours, 7 squadrons of Allied fighters intercept Supermarine Spitfires from No. 1 Squadron, South African Air Force, Curtis P-40, Kitty Hawks from No. 7 South African Wing. Approximately 50 fighters total. They dive on the lumbering transports. The Me-323s cannot evade. Maximum speed 219 kilometers per hour, 136 miles per hour. The Spitfires and Kitty Hawks are 3 times faster. The German transports are massive, 55-meter wingspan, 28-meter length, fabric and plywood construction. They burn easily. Within 15 minutes, 16 or 17 Me-323s fall into the Mediterranean. Some explode in midair. Some catch fire and spiral down. Some attempt emergency landings on water and break apart. Approximately 320 German personnel die. Crews, passengers, cargo is lost. Tanks, vehicles, supplies. The Bf-109s claim 3 or 4 P-40s. The exchange ratio is catastrophic for Germany. This is what happens when the largest land-based transport aircraft of World War II encounters modern fighters without adequate protection. The Me-323 was never designed for contested airspace. It was designed to move heavy cargo from point A to point B. When point B was defended by enemy fighters, the Gigant died. The genesis of the Gigant began not with the powered transport, but with a glider. In October 1940, German aircraft manufacturers Junkers and Messerschmitt received specifications for a large cargo glider. The requirement was specific. Capacity for 188mm flak gun plus SDKFZ 7 half-track tractor, or 1 Panzer IV medium tank, or equivalent cargo. The glider was intended for Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. Messerschmitt's design, initially designated Me-261W, then Me-263, then Me-321, secured the contract. The Junkers Ju 322 Mammoth was rejected. All wood construction proved problematic. The prototype exhibited severe instability during test flight. The program was canceled. The Me-321 Gigant first flew February 25, 1941. Test pilot Karl Bohr towed behind a Junkers Ju-90. The glider carried 3 tons ballast simulating cargo. Bauer reported controls were heavy, responses sluggish. The design was modified. Cockpit enlarged for co-pilot and radio operator. Dual controls installed. Electric servo motors added to assist moving massive control surfaces. Braking parachute added for landing. Specifications for the Me-321 were impressive. Length 28.15 meters, 92 feet 4 inches. Wingspan 55 meters, 180 feet. Height 10.15 meters, 33 feet 4 inches. Wing area 300 square meters. Empty weight 12,000 kilograms. Maximum loaded weight 43,600 kilograms, nearly 44 tons. The glider could carry 23,000 kilograms cargo, 51,000 pounds, or 200 troops, or 1 Panzer IV tank. The problem was launching. The Ju-90 lacked sufficient power to tow a fully loaded Me-321. 3. Messerschmitt Bf 110 heavy fighters were tried in formation. The Troika Schlepp. Triple tow. 3 Bf-110s flying in V formation. Each aircraft connected to the glider by tow cable. Rocket-assisted takeoff boosters mounted under the glider's wings provided additional thrust. 4 to 8 rockets depending on load. The procedure was dangerous. On one occasion in 1941, during testing, 1 booster rocket failed to ignite. The asymmetric thrust caused the Me-321 to swerve. The tow cables tangled. All 3 Bf-110s collided. The glider crashed. 129 people died. Crews of the 3 Bf-110s, 120 passengers and crew aboard the Me-321. It was the deadliest aviation accident to that date. The record stood until the Tachikawa air disaster in 1953 killed 129, matching the toll, and was not exceeded until the 1960 New York mid-air collision. The Troika Schlep gave the Me 321 approximately 400-kilometer range, 250 miles. One way, insufficient for operational needs. Ernst Udet, Director General of Equipment for the Luftwaffe, demanded a better solution. Ernst Heinkel proposed, joining two Heinkel He-111 bombers into a single towing aircraft. The He-111 Z-Zwilling, twin. The Zwilling consisted of two He-111 fuselages connected by a center wing section housing a fifth engine. Total power 5, Daimler-Benz engines, 5,100 horsepower. The Zwilling could tow a loaded Me 321 safely. Development was slow. The first Zwilling flew August 1941. Production was limited. Only approximately 12 were built. Me 321 operations remained constrained by towing aircraft availability. In early 1941, feedback from transport group and pilots on the Eastern Front prompted a decision. The Me 321 should receive engines, become self-powered, eliminate dependence on tugs. The powered variant was designated Me 323 Gigant. The first prototype, Me 323 V1, received 4 Gnome Rhone GR-14N radial engines. 4 engines proved insufficient. The aircraft required towing for takeoff when loaded, could return to base, empty under its own power. Little better than the glider. The second prototype, V2, received 6 Gnome Rhone engines, 3 per wing, counter-rotating. Port engines rotated counterclockwise. Starboard engines rotated clockwise. This reduced torque. The V2 flew early 1942. Performance was adequate. Production was authorized. The Gnome Rhone 14 N48/49 was a 14-cylinder 2-row radial air-cooled engine. Displacement 38.7 liters. Power output varied by variant. Approximately 990 horsepower to 1,180 horsepower for takeoff. The engines were French, manufactured in occupied France at factories controlled by Germany. The selection was deliberate. Using French engines conserved German engine production capacity for fighters and bombers. Specifications for the production Me 323 D1 were precise. Length 28.2 meters, 92 feet 7 inches. Wingspan 55.2 meters, 181 feet. Height 10.15 meters, 33 feet, 3 inches. Wing area 300 square meters. Empty weight 27,330 kilograms. Loaded weight 29,500 kilograms. Maximum takeoff weight 43,000 kilograms. Some sources cite 45,000 kilograms for later variants. The wings were high-mounted. Semi-cantilever. Center section supported by single strut each side. Outer sections tapered with hedral angle. Construction was plywood-covered wooden structure for wing surfaces and steel tube framework with fabric covering for fuselage. Wooden fabric saved aluminum. Reduced weight. Allowed production in furniture factories. Dispersed manufacturing reduced vulnerability to strategic bombing. The cargo hold was enormous. 11 meters long, 36 feet, 3 meters wide, 10 feet, 3.4 meters high, 11 feet. Clamshell doors at the nose opened outward and upward. Loading was straightforward. Drive vehicles in, roll artillery in, stack crates. Close doors, fly. Typical loads included 2 4-ton trucks, or one 15-centimeter SFH 18 heavy field howitzer with its SDKFZ's 7 half-track tractor. Total 16 tons, or 188-millimeter flak gun with complete crew, equipment, and ammunition, or 52 drums of fuel, 45 gallons per drum, or 8,700 loaves of bread, or 130 troops, or 60 stretchers with wounded. The landing gear was unique. 10 semi-recessed wheels arranged in 2 rows of 5, designed to distribute weight over large area. Allowed operations from unprepared fields. The wheels flexed like caterpillar treads absorbing rough terrain. The tail wheel was conventional. Crew comprised 5 personnel, 2 pilots side by side in armored cockpit, 2 flight engineers positioned in wing leading edges. Each engineer controlled 3 engines on their side. Radio operator. Additional personnel could include defensive gunners, up to 10 machine gunners depending on armament variant. Defensive armament varied by production series. Early D1 variants had minimal armament. two 7.92mm MG-15 machine guns. Later variants received substantial increases. D6 variants carried 5.13mm MG-131 machine guns. Dorsal position behind wings. Beam positions in fuselage sides. Some variants trialed heavier weapons. 11.20mm MG-151 cannons. 4.13mm MG-131 machine guns. The armament was inadequate. Slow aircraft cannot be adequately defended against fast fighters regardless of gun numbers. Performance was modest. Maximum speed, 219 kilometers per hour at sea level, 136 miles per hour. Cruise speed approximately 180 kilometers per hour, 112 miles per hour. Service ceiling approximately 4,000 meters depending on load, 13,000 feet. Range 1,000 to 1,200 kilometers loaded, 620 to 750 miles. Endurance approximately 5 hours. The engines were underpowered for the aircraft's weight. Proposals to install 6 BMW 801 radials, more powerful German engines producing 1,560 horsepower each, were not implemented. Production capacity was insufficient. The Gnome-Rhone engines remained standard throughout production. Rocket-assisted takeoff remained optional. 4 rockets could be mounted under each wing outboard of engines. The rockets provided additional thrust for heavily loaded takeoffs from short fields. Production began mid-1941 with glider conversions. Purpose-built. Me 323s followed. Gothair wagon fabric manufactured most aircraft. Zeppelin Werk Staaken built others. Total production varied by source. Approximately 198 to 213 aircraft. 15 were conversions from Me 321 gliders. The remainder built as powered aircraft from the beginning. Variants included D1 through D6 and E series. Differences were primarily engines, defensive armament, structural strengthening, and fuel capacity. The D6 was most heavily armed. The E series received Gnome-Rhone 14R engines with improved power output. Production ceased, April 1944. By then, the strategic situation made large slow transports operationally untenable. The Me 323 entered service 1943. Primary operations were Eastern Front and Mediterranean. Transport missions delivering supplies to forward units. Evacuation missions removing wounded. The aircraft could operate from primitive airstrips. The large cargo capacity allowed consolidated loads. One Me 323 replaced multiple Junkers, Ju-52 transports. This improved efficiency when aircraft availability was limited, but vulnerability was extreme. The fabric and plywood construction burned easily. Fuel tanks were not self-sealing initially. Later variants received self-sealing tanks. Armor protection was minimal. Pilots had armored seats. No other crew positions were protected. The aircraft was large, easy to spot, easy to track, easy to hit. Speed was insufficient to evade fighters. Maneuverability was non-existent. Defensive guns could not prevent determined attacks. Combat losses accumulated rapidly. Every mission over contested territory risked interception. German fighter escorts were increasingly scarce. Luftwaffe fighter strength was diverted to homeland defense against Allied strategic bombing. Mediterranean and Eastern Front operations received lower priority. Me 323s flew with inadequate escort or no escort. Allied fighters destroyed them consistently. The April 22, 1943 massacre was worst, but not unique. On November 8, 1942, during Operation Torch, Allied forces landed in North Africa. MIA 323s attempted to reinforce Axis forces in Tunisia. Multiple aircraft were shot down. Exact numbers uncertain. Documentation incomplete. But losses were severe. In early 1943, Me 323s supported German forces in Tunisia. Allied air superiority was total. Transports attempting daylight missions were massacred. Operations shifted to night. Night missions reduced losses, but also reduced effectiveness. Navigation was difficult. Landing on primitive strips in darkness was dangerous. Accident rates increased. By mid-1943, Me 323 operations in Mediterranean theater effectively ceased. The aircraft were too vulnerable. Losses exceeded replacement capacity. Remaining aircraft transferred to Eastern Front. Operations continued in Soviet Union through 1944. The Red Air Force was less effective than Western Allied air forces initially. German transports had better survival rates on Eastern Front. but Soviet fighter quality and pilot skill improved continuously. By late 1944, Me-323s faced similar threats everywhere. Individual stories illustrate the broader pattern. One Me-323 pilot, name unrecorded in available sources, described flying supplies into Stalingrad pocket in winter 1942-43. Missions were flown at night, low altitude, following terrain. Soviet anti-aircraft fire was intense. Searchlights probed darkness. Tracers arced upward, landing at primitive airstrips under fire. Unloading quickly. Loading wounded. Takeoff under fire. Flying back through same gauntlet. Multiple crews did not return. Those who survived flew again next night. The aircraft proved surprisingly durable when not destroyed outright. Multiple Me-323s returned from missions with extensive battle damage. Fabric torn, wooden structure splintered, engines damaged. But flying, the distributed structure absorbed damage better than metal construction in some circumstances. Bullet holes in fabric could be patched in field. Wooden spars could be spliced. Engines could be replaced. If the aircraft survived to land, it could often be repaired. But catastrophic damage was common. Incendiary rounds ignited fabric. Fuel fires consumed wooden structures. Engines hit by gunfire failed explosively. Control cables severed. Pilots killed or incapacitated. When a fighter pressed a determined attack, the Me-323 had no defense except the gunners. Gunners were brave. They were inadequate. Rifle caliber and light machine guns could not stop fighters firing 20mm or 30mm cannons. One documented incident involved Me-323 shot down by Soviet fighters over Kuban Bridgehead, June 1943. The transport was carrying fuel drums and ammunition. Fighter attack ignited cargo. Aircraft exploded mid-air. All aboard killed. Wreckage scattered over several square kilometers. This was repeated hundreds of times across 3 years of operations. By April 1944, production ceased. Remaining 323s continued operations through summer 1944. Attrition was continuous. Aircraft were lost to fighters, to anti-aircraft fire, to operational accidents. No systematic replacement. By autumn 1944, few remained operational. The type was withdrawn from frontline service. No complete Me-323 survives. The Luftwaffenmuseum der Bundeswehr in Berlin possesses one main wing spar. A salvaged wing section was used as a bridge over a creek in eastern Poland for decades post-war. Its current status is unknown. In 2012, a complete wreck was discovered in the Mediterranean Sea near La Maddalena, an island near Sardinia. The aircraft lies in approximately 60 meters of water, 15 kilometers from shore. It was shot down by Bristol Beaufighter on July 26, 1943, while flying from Sardinia to Pistoia in Italy. The wreck is protected. Salvage is prohibited. It remains a war grave. The strategic impact of the Me-323 was limited. The aircraft moved substantial cargo, delivered supplies to forward units, evacuated wounded. These missions mattered tactically, but strategically, the Me-323 could not compensate for Germany's deteriorating logistical situation. Allied interdiction of supply lines was comprehensive. Naval blockade, strategic bombing, fighter sweeps, partisan attacks. German logistics collapsed under cumulative pressure. One type of transport aircraft, regardless of cargo capacity, could not reverse that. The comparison to Allied heavy transports is instructive. The Douglas C-47 Skytrain, American equivalent transport, was smaller, carried less cargo, but was faster, longer ranged, better protected, and available in vastly greater numbers. Over 10,000 C-47s were built. They operated globally. They sustained Allied offensives through air logistics. The Me-323, with 200 units built, could not match that impact. The tactical utility was real within constraints. When operating in uncontested airspace, the Me-323 was effective. Large cargo capacity, short field capability, nose-loading doors, simplified handling. Crews praised the aircraft's load-carrying ability. But uncontested airspace was increasingly rare. By 1943, Germany did not control airspace anywhere except briefly and locally. The Me-323's operational window was narrow and closing. The technical achievement should not be dismissed. The Me-323 was the largest land-based transport aircraft to fly during World War II. Only flying boats exceeded its dimensions. Building an aircraft that size from wood and fabric with minimal aluminum was impressive. The engineering solved substantial problems: wing loading distribution, control surface actuation, multi-engine coordination, ground handling of an aircraft weighing 43 tons with 10-wheel landing gear. These were not trivial challenges, but engineering excellence cannot compensate for operational impossibility. The Me-323 was too slow to evade fighters, too large to hide, too vulnerable to survive in contested environments. Germany needed transports. The Me-323 was available, therefore it was used. The mathematics were brutal. Losses exceeded sustainability. The program failed, not because the aircraft was badly designed, but because the mission was impossible given strategic circumstances. The gap between expectation and reality defined Me-323 operations. Germany expected large cargo capacity would improve logistics. Reality was logistics required survivability as much as capacity. Germany expected distributed production would protect manufacturing from bombing. Reality was strategic situation, degraded faster than production could compensate. Germany expected the MiG-323 would support offensive operations. Reality was Germany was defensive by time. The aircraft entered service, and defensive operations require surviving long enough to deliver supplies. The human cost was measured in crews lost and cargo never delivered. Exact casualty figures are unavailable. Records were incomplete. Many losses occurred during the war's final years when documentation was chaotic. Estimates suggest several hundred aircrew died flying Me-323s. Several hundred more died as passengers. Trucks, tanks, artillery, ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, all lost with the aircraft. The cumulative impact weakened German forces incrementally. One lost transport did not lose battles. 100 lost transports contributed to losing campaigns. The survivors, pilots and crew who flew Me-323s and lived, described the aircraft with mixed emotions: pride and accomplishment, flying the largest transport, delivering critical supplies under impossible conditions, fear of interception, knowledge that every mission might be fatal, frustration at inadequate escort, anger at being sent on missions everyone knew were suicide, respect for the aircraft's capacity, contempt for its vulnerability. All these emotions coexist in survivor accounts. One former pilot stated post-war that the Me-323 was a magnificent aircraft destroyed by circumstances. It could carry anything, fly from anywhere, but could not survive combat. Another pilot described it as a death trap. Too slow, too big, too flammable. Both assessments are accurate. The aircraft's qualities and deficiencies both derived from the same design decisions. Maximize cargo capacity. Minimize strategic material use. Accept vulnerability as inevitable. The legacy of the Me-323 exists primarily in documentation. Photographs show the massive aircraft loading vehicles through clamshell nose doors. Film footage shows takeoffs with rocket assist, 6 engines roaring, fabric wings flexing. Combat reports describe massacres like April of the 22nd, 1943. Technical drawings show construction details. Engineering documents explain design decisions. Together, these sources preserve knowledge of an aircraft that flew briefly, died quickly, and left minimal physical trace. The tactical lessons were absorbed by post-war transport design. Large cargo capacity remains valuable. Nose loading doors are standard on modern military transports. Multi-engine redundancy is expected, but vulnerability to fighters is unacceptable. Modern transports are faster, higher altitude capable, equipped with defensive systems, flare dispensers, chaff, radar warning receivers, electronic countermeasures, armored cockpits, self-sealing tanks. These were not available in 1943. The Me-323 operated without them, paid the price. The strategic lesson was simpler. Air superiority determines whether transports survive. Germany lost air superiority. German transports died. Cause and effect. Simple. Brutal. Inevitable. The Me-323 could not change that equation. No transport could. Only regaining air superiority would have mattered. Germany never regained it. The transports died. April 22, 1943. 27 Me-323s, 16 or 17 shot down, 320 dead, cargo lost, supplies never delivered. Tunisia campaign weakened, one massacre among many. The largest land-based transport of the war, proved unable to transport supplies when the enemy controlled the air. That is the final assessment. That is the historical record. The Messerschmitt Me 323 Gigant, largest land-based transport aircraft of World War II, 55-meter wingspan, 11-meter cargo hold, 6 engines, clamshell nose doors, 23-ton cargo capacity, fabric and wood construction, maximum speed 219 kilometers per hour, inadequate defensive armament, extreme vulnerability to fighters, 200 built, heavy losses, production ceased, April 1944, no complete survivors, 1 underwater wreck, memory preserved in documents and photographs. The specifications describe impressive capability. The history describes operational failure, not failure of design, failure of circumstances. The aircraft was adequate for its intended purpose. The purpose, moving heavy cargo through contested airspace, was impossible. That is the gap between engineering and reality. The Me 323 was fine aircraft used in impossible missions. It flew. It transported cargo. It burned when intercepted. The crews who flew it were brave. The passengers who rode it were brave. The ground crews who maintained it were dedicated. None of that mattered when Spitfires and P-40s attacked. Courage cannot defeat physics. Fabric cannot stop cannon shells. Wooden structures cannot survive incendiaries. Slow aircraft cannot evade fast fighters. These facts are absolute. The Me 323 proved them repeatedly. That is the story of the Messerschmitt Me 323 Gigant. Not a wonder weapon, not revolutionary technology. An oversized transport aircraft that tried to operate in circumstances that made survival impossible. It carried tanks. It carried troops. It carried supplies. When the enemy appeared, it died. Simple, brutal, historical. The 6-engine giant. The largest land-based transport. The aircraft with clamshell nose doors that could carry 20-ton tanks. The transport that burned when intercepted. The Gigant that was too big to hide and too slow to run. That is the accurate description. That is the complete assessment. That is what the evidence supports.